good opening question is, why is this such a difficult nut to crack?
Well, I think there are many reasons, but most of all, it's China is culturally distant. It's geographically and culturally distant from most of the Western, especially English-speaking world, right? Like from where you are, you're even though South Africa is part of the BRICS, we're still a continent apart. And forget about America. It's like this whole Pacific Ocean, and a lot of people. There's just a lot of general ignorance about China. And because of that, I think to fill in the blank, it's easy for propaganda to take its place, to take place of like real information. A lot of people, they will have formed very strong opinions about China, even though they may have never been to China or they don't read Chinese. So they receive a lot of so-called, received wisdoms from their media or from quote unquote alternative news channel they trust, which might not always be the most objective and impartial. That's why we're here, right? Because I'm trying to provide some Chinese perspective as a person who was born in China. Back in 1976, after 1 month after Mao died. So I grew up in China.
The good old days.
Yeah, like good old days. Like I grew up in China as the first post-cultural revolution Chinese. Yeah, I can tell you all about the good old days. And so I have my perspective. I grew up in China in the 1980s. I have a very happy childhood. So this is why I always have very fond memories of China. And I've been visiting China on and off. Last time I was there, it was this year, in fact, in April and early May. So, and every time I go there, it's actually like visiting a different place, because the pace of change in China happens so rapidly. I remember the former Czech president, what's his name, Havel. He said, China changed so fast for us, changes too fast for us to be astonished. And I think that's exactly it, because a lot of the people, they may have heard from someone who been to China maybe in the 1990s or in the early 2000s, but that China is gone. That China doesn't exist anymore. That's like, because it's China had changed so fast, it might as well be like a generation ago. Right, like my little cousin, who we're more than 20 years apart, and the world she grew up in China is a completely different world from the one I grew up in, and she is actually the Zoomer population of China, or the late millennials in China. They are the first generation in China that grew up with abundance, with they can take abundance for granted. When I grew up in China, let me tell you, I had to live with ration papers. I live in an age with rations, where you need ration paper for everything, for rice, for sugar, for cooking oil. And my auntie would send me to, at that time, you can't just go to a supermarket to get rice. You go to government approved rice station to get rice with your ration papers. And I get most of the ration in the family, because I was a growing teenager. So I actually get the most allotment of rice. And I would be the one who tasked to go to the government rice station to haul back 20 kilos of rice back home. Of course, back then there's also no car, so I did it all like on my back and walking up and down the mountains back in the days. Yeah. No, I'm not kidding. Not kidding. I'm not kidding about up and down the mountains, by the way, because I live in Chongqing. Chongqing, for people who don't know, is a very mountainous city. The whole city is built on top of the mountains. So there's a quite great variation of elevation within the city. So like the rice station is actually on it's like I have to climb to go to the rice station and come back down. So I was not kidding about going up the mountains to get rice. Yeah.
Carl, just before we go any further, because we have to bring this up, you and I are obviously both funded by the CCP,
yes.
And we are government shills.
Yes.
So everything that we say is, of course, Chinese propaganda.
Yes, I'm still waiting for my checks to clear from Xi Jinping. I told him to put in the mail last time, but I'm still waiting for that to clear. Yeah.
Also, I deliberately said CCP because we know that is that's the dog whistle. If someone says CCP, we already know that we have to look at them with an evil eye.
Right. It's true. I mean, the official English translation is Communist Party of China, so CPC. I mean, in Chinese, it doesn't really matter, but I think in English, every time they mention CCP, it's like, CCP is going to take over the world. CCP is sabotaging your government. CCP is listening to you. But you know what? That's fine.
The point. That's the point,
Yeah.
Carl. When the term CCP originates, I think, out of the West, not... If someone says CPC, you know that they probably know something about China.
Right. Correct. That's fair. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I have a direct line to Xi Jinping, right? That's where I get my instructions. They told me to go to Jerm's show this week. you're gonna receive
or else you're gonna be shot.
Yes.
But
so
that's the
why
other thing about trying to debunk myths like this. So I'm fascinated by China. As somebody who is an African, the whole world fascinates me because we are so behind everything, right? And for the longest time, Carl, I believed all the nonsense about China. And it's only in recent years where I decided I wanted to challenge my own understanding, what I had been fed. And it's almost like it's completely inverted.
It's easy to believe because otherwise a lot of people just don't have any information about China. So you kind of, whoever fills that blank sheet is gonna and usually that's the mainstream legacy media or some quote-unquote alternative media that turns out to be funded by like NED, USAID, or all these three-letter agencies, and those are ones that are actually doing the most numbers on places like YouTube, because they also kind of tell people what they want to hear. Because especially as China start to rise and China grow in importance in the world, now there's a lot of copium that's been produced about China, especially in the West. Like they don't want to, they don't want the automatic is it's almost automatic rejection to reject anything positive about China. People got to put a negative spin on it. There must be something kind of there must be some dark, insidious reason behind the rise of China, and there must be some bad, potentially ominous impact of rise of China. So, and I think it also serves to distract from the political realities at home, particularly in the West. I mean, especially in U.S. That's a place where I lived for almost 30 years, and I think for most Americans living in the U.S., it's obvious to them the place is dysfunctional. Right? I mean, we have a freaking reality TV show host as a president, but what they don't want you to see is that that China is doing something differently. Rather than plowing trillions of dollars into funding wars around the world, that you can actually invest in your own infrastructure and education and propel the country forward. They don't want you to think about that. Instead, they put out the information to convince you, yes, United States might be bad. Yes, Europe might be dysfunctional. But China is much, much worse, much, much darker. Do not look to China as an alternative. Don't do it. It's bad. It's worse, in fact. So I think that's a purpose of those propaganda. And this is why I highly encourage people to actually go travel to China, to let your lying eyes convince you, what is reality. I mean, you you kind of travel to the periphery of China. Hong Kong is part of China now. It's still a little bit different from mainland China, but at least you got there. You know, you have seen what the East is like, unlike most people.
But Carl, you know that someone's going to ask, yes, but why then did you leave China? Why are you living in the US?
Okay, that's a good question. That's a fair question. Well, my dad traveled to United States in 1985. He was the first post-cultural revolution generation of Chinese students that was sent abroad. So back in the 1980s, Deng Xiaoping said, okay, we got to send Chinese students abroad to learn because like China has fallen behind in science and in development. So we need to go to send students to the Western countries to learn advanced technology, learn the advanced management methods, you know, whatever. He also said, I understand most of them will never come back just because in the 1980s, China was very poor, and obviously you can get much more paying jobs in the West. He said it's okay. It's okay that most of them don't come back. Even if 20% of them do come back, that will be a net plus for us. You know, it's better than zero. And so my dad did go to United States to study for his PhD, and they brought me to U.S. in 1989. So 1989 was the year of the Tiananmen Square protest. So my dad did not agree with the government, how the government handled the Tiananmen Square protest. So they decided not to come back to China, and they brought me to United States. So that's how I ended up in U.S. as a teenager. You know, like I was 13 years old. And one thing that started to change, though, is by, I think, most of them, my dad's Chinese classmates, they also stayed in the U.S. after they graduated. They went to, they got green card, got citizenship, they joined the U.S. corporate world. But after about 10 or 20 years, many of them kind of hit the glass ceiling or bamboo ceiling because they find themselves can no longer rise to the top management for various reasons. And then this coincided around early 2000 to 2010 when Chinese economy started taking off. So the most ambitious one do return to China because they realize in China, the sky is the limit. They can be CEOs, they can be founder of companies. There's none of that restriction they face in the West. You know, like example, I think for people might be familiar with is the founder of TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors, Morris Chan. I mean, he went to Taiwan, but very similar circumstances. So Morris Chan was born in China. Then when he was a little kid, you know, he immigrated to the United States because the communists won on mainland, and he was a very important top management in Texas Instrument, which is a big tech company in United States. But after a while, he realized he wants a top job. He wants a CEO. But afterwards, even though after everything he did for Texas Instrument, he realized they're not going to give him that top job, you know. And so, you know, whether because he's Chinese or whatever, but he wasn't going to get that top job. And at that time, the Taiwan government approached him and said, hey, we're going to give you tons of money. We're going to give you a lot of tax incentives for you to open the semiconductor business in Taiwan, using your experience in the industry and your connections in U.S., I think we can make a success. So that's what he did. So now Taiwan Semiconductors is like one of the most valuable firm in the world because they produce the most advanced semiconductor chips that everybody needs. But this same kind of process was playing out with mainland China as well. A lot of the Chinese talent went back to China because that's where the opportunity is. That's where they can, they can get higher achievement. And this is kind of the fundamental understanding in the West about China stealing technology, quote unquote. I mean, I'm pretty sure industrial espionage does happen. I mean, that happened everywhere. But the real process of knowledge transfer is these Chinese students who were sent out by Deng Xiaoping back in the 80s, even though Deng Xiaoping knew most of them will not return within his lifetime. But many of them did after 2000 to 2010s when China economy started taking off. And they brought back the knowledge and the experience again working in the Western companies, and that's kind of the main driver for kind of the technology transfer that did take place between China and West. And I don't know. I feel like I went off on tangent because we're just going everywhere, but it doesn't matter.
No, well, your espionage comment is actually very good because the Chinese what do you call them? Hyper fast railways, trains that they are currently building. Apparently, a lot of that tech comes from Japan. Now, I don't really have a problem.
And Germany.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with this because it's better for people.
well, that technology is not stolen. That was bought. It was back in 2008, when China started to this massive expansion of their high-speed rail project, they invited different Western companies to bid for the project. So including Siemens from Germany, including Japan, including Bombardier from Canada. And the condition is, okay, we're going to give you this huge contract. But our condition is you must produce in China. You must have given like licensed production in China, and you must do technology transfer. So this is all above the table. Like as a condition for market access to China, you got to do technology transfer. And all these companies, they kind of weigh the pros and cons, but they couldn't say no to shit tons of money. They say, okay, yeah, well, I mean, knowledge transfer that will take time. The money we can get it now. And so what happened is China was able to absorb this different technology from Japan, from Germany, and after 5-10 years, they were able to indigenize the technology, and now China is exporting high-speed rail across the world. But from the very beginning, it was very above the table. It was like any foreign firms who come to China, you have to do now technology transfer is part of the deal as a condition for giving you the market access. Now, China was able to demand that because China was big market and a big giant pool of cheap labor. That's the main draw for a lot of Western multinationals to do business in China.
But they're all slaves, Carl.
Yeah,
it's all slaves.
Of course. I mean that kind of mean kind of persists till today, right? I mean, China got to where they are because they're all slave labor. I remember reading a tweet from Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert comic, right? I love Dilbert. I used to read Dilbert.
And but Scott's actually a decent guy.
He's a well-educated American, right? You can't say he's ignorant. He's a well-educated, like you can consider sort of public intellectual in United States. But he said, when everybody move on to robotics and automation, China is going to be screwed because they're going to be screwed out of their advantage in cheap labor. Now, this is just ignorance about China because if you actually look at the statistics, China employ more industrial robots today than the rest of the world combined. And they actually, their factories, they have like lights off factories, like entirely automated assembly lines at putting together EVs, putting together cars. So China is well prepared for automation. It's much more prepared in automation than, say, United States, because U.S. don't have manufacturing anymore. China, they're actually applying AI and robotics in their advanced manufacturing. This is why China is presenting a bigger threat now to a lot of their Western competitors. This is why you're going to get more China threat articles in the West because of that. They talk about Chinese overcapacity, made in China 2025, how China is going to take over the world because the government subsidizes everything. So it's unfair competition. But look, if Chinese government
Trump's going to save the world. The tariffs, Carl, tariffs are going to save everybody.
I think only some segment of Americans believe that at this point, but because it's such low information. I mean, I can't speak about South Africa, but I went through the American public education system. I can tell you the American public education system is crap. They Mark Twain said, he said about newspaper. He said, if you don't read newspapers, you are ignorant. If you read newspapers, then you're misinformed. But this is how American education works. If you don't go to school, you're not educated. But if you go to school, you're miseducated. So there's no win situation. But we have this is how we got Trump in the office in the first place. But the thing is, there's a lot of projection when the West talk about China. They're not talking about China as a country per se. They're talking about China more as a foil, as like a projection of their worst fears, right? And like when a lot of time when, especially United States, when they talk about China, it's almost 100%, projection. When they talk about China as a dystopian surveillance state, for example, right? I mean,
with a social credit system.
with a social credit system, right? But in reality, Trump just authorized the private company Palantir to access all the U.S. government records. Like, look, first of all, as a person who holds U.S. passport at this moment, I don't care if China get my data because China don't have jurisdiction over me. Chinese government can't do anything to me. But I'd be more concerned when the NSA read my email and Palantir have all my data because they can't get me. I have to pay taxes to Uncle Sam. They can get me for one reason or another. And also the social credit system is not a thing in China. It's a myth. There's no such thing as social credit system. I mean,
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Sorry, Carl. Let me jump in there because this happens all the time. I have these discussions constantly, and this is the response I get. Well, you don't live in China. How would you know? Okay, fine. So let me speak to somebody who's in China. No, you can't speak to somebody who's in China because they're in China, and so therefore the government is watching them.
Right. It's like this is the thing when I talk about China to people, and people will insist that no, Carl, you don't know what's really going on in China. We know more about China than you because we have the freedom of information because we have a free internet.
CNN.
Yeah. I'm like, look, I lived in U.S. for 30 years. I can access the same information as you do, except I actually grew up in China and traveled to China, speaks the language, right? And so it's because sometimes I think what it is people are being conditioned to think about China in a certain way. If you challenge their long-held belief, it's like you're challenging their identity, right? I mean, like for people who are open-minded, such as yourself, sir, you sometimes you receive information, you are able to absorb it, even challenge your pre-existing biases. But for most people, I think, when they find their long-held belief get challenged, they get very defensive because it's almost like a challenge to their whole world system. Suddenly their whole belief system get challenged. It's their challenge to our identity. So they get very, very defensive about that. And so again, I just say, just travel to China, people. Like, just go. It's very easy now for people in the West, especially if you're in the European Union. Many of the EU countries, you get like 30 days visa-free visit to China. But unfortunately for the BRICS countries,
on condition though, there's an armed Chinese soldier who will be with you 24 hours a day, and he will only take you to places that are designated.
That's correct. And if you go off the course, they will shoot you. And they will bill your family for the bullets. And
for the next 3 generations.
And so for the people who could afford to travel to China, who can get visa very easily, I do highly recommend you go check it out for yourself to see if it's really like how they portray it in the mainstream media. Go ahead.
When you and I were in Hong Kong last year, I saw absolutely no social credit system.
Right. Well, Hong Kong is a little bit different, Jerms, because Hong Kong functioned under what's so-called one country, two system. And that means when Hong Kong was handed over to China in 1997, returned to China in 1997 from being a British colony, one of the conditions was that that China promised was that they will keep Hong Kong system as is. So whatever Hong Kong operated under, under British, they will leave that alone. So in effect, it will just be the British and colonial governors that's leaving. The other part of Hong Kong, they will leave it alone. So Hong Kong is a little bit different in the fact that like many Chinese citizens from mainland to travel to Hong Kong, they actually need to apply for a visa. they actually need to apply for a travel permit, and then they have once you're in Hong Kong, there's no Great Firewall. You can access internet, whatever, free. So there's some difference. Obviously China, they do have censorship, they do have the Great Firewall, but I think
it's not utopia. That's the point.
Yeah. It's just it's like people need to realize.
It's a normal country.
Exactly. It's
not special. It's not totalitarian. It's not some sort of sci-fi dystopia, but it's also not utopia.
Exactly. If you go to China, talk to the normal Chinese people, you'll find plenty of Chinese people bitching about the government, just like you would in South Africa or United States. That's because that's what people around the world do. They will bitch about their government, but after that, they're not gonna get arrested. People think, they're gonna get thrown into gulags or like they're gonna be in labor
Those
camp.
little squares on the cameras that follow you.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's everywhere in China.
That's the Skynet, right?
Yes.
And so so one thing, there are a lot of cameras in China. That's for sure. I mean, when I traveled to China, I was surprised because coming from the U.S., I was actually surprised by the prevalence of cameras, and I did ask about it, like my cousin who lived there, and for her biggest complaint about the camera is she gets a lot more traffic tickets now because the cameras will catch her speeding, and that's her biggest complaint. But I guess in China they have a different relationship with technology as people do in the West, because a lot of people think camera surveillance, they think Black Mirror, they think like dystopia, and I think rightly so, because our government do a lot of shit. The U.S. government, I know for sure, I don't know about South Africa, but I know U.S. government do a lot of shit with surveillance. That happened. We only start to know about it because of Snowden leaks, and now they're completely open about it. When they say, we're going to hand over all your data, government data, to Palantir, this private company, so they're going to, and Palantir is the same company that work with the U.S. Pentagon, right? They also do things like how to provide targeting information on the battlefield. They're the same one who is going to isolate, who is going to identify dangerous element in the society, right? And that's more scary to me. Personally, just because I hold U.S. passport, whereas go ahead.
In South Africa we do have a few cameras, but they're all stolen. And the ones that are still standing on the side of the street have got bullet holes in them, so we're all good.
But I'll tell you one thing. In China, it's very safe. I mean, you can walk in the street at night in big cities. Women can walk out late at night in big cities. Little children play outside after dark. It's just compared to most cities in Europe, America. I'm not even going to compare to South Africa. I know it's bad over there. So compared to most other places in the world, China is very safe.
Listen, I often joke with people. They say to me, yeah, but China's this communist hellhole. Well, listen, whatever China is doing, please bring it to South Africa, because that'll certainly enhance it'll enhance our country. So listen, if it's communism, please bring it. And I mean, but that, Carl, that's one of the things that I realized over the last few years, is that you can't apply one word as a descriptor for an entire country or an entire nation. The idea of communism or capitalism or any ism is largely empty, because these things are so nuanced, and you can't just say, well, this works in America, so therefore it will work in China. You're dealing with different cultures and different histories.
And when you talk about isms, different people have different ideas. Like in America, people think like Joe Biden is a communist, right? There are people who think Joe Biden or AOCs are communists. So it's kind of hard. Sometimes it's kind of hard. It's hard. You don't even know where to argue. That's why just go to China, see for yourself how people live. I mean, I think it's undeniable. People are living much better life in China now than, say, 40 years ago when I was born. I mean, I can tell you all about the time I had to go get ration papers to buy anything, but it's just a fact that people are living better. People say, oh, what it's because they're exploiting slave labor. The Chinese miracle is built on exploitation. But look, it's a fact that everybody in China is doing well and doing better. Like when 90% of Chinese own homes. I saw a statistic reported from 2017. 70% of Chinese millennials own their own homes. 70%. And that was like, what, 5 years ago? No, more than 5 years ago, 2017. Now it's 8 years ago. No, I did my math incorrect. It's 8 years ago. It's 8 years ago, and that means today that number is probably even higher, because now even the youngest millennials are already in their 30s, right, late 20s, and so that's not the case. I know that's not the case in the West. A lot of people. Yeah,
that's also. That's also another mental barrier. So I keep interrupting you, but I hope you don't mind. But that's also another mental block that I find so many people have. They go, well, how does a communist country have such a preference for private property? But it is like that.
I will tell you something. I was shocked when I find about eminent domain laws in the United States. When in the early 2000s, I was talking with, when I first started working in U.S., I was talking with my colleagues. I was like, what? I thought this is a land of the free. How can you just claim, how can the government just claim because they need it, they can take away your property? They're like, well, that's eminent domains. Well, in China, they have what those so-called nail houses. So sometimes you have like a highway, and somehow you had to split off because there's a big house in the middle because the owner refused to move because maybe they were waiting for higher compensation, and when the negotiation failed, the developer just decided, okay, screw it, we're just going to build around you. And it's very common. They even have develop a term for it in China. They call nail houses. These people that refuse to move. So you're gonna have like a farmhouse that's in the middle of the huge mall parking lot because the farmers didn't want to move. So now he got a huge parking lot in his front yard. So, and also another thing people don't realize, especially people in the West, Chinese people don't pay property tax. Once they bought the house, they don't have to pay annual property tax to the government. So they own that house till they die. But people say, oh, whoa, you don't really own the house, because you only have the rights for 75 years. Well, technically it's true, but what actually happened is when you sell that house to somebody else, it's 75 years again. that the clock it gets reset, and also you can pass it to your children, and in the most cases it just like that's not even a thing, that they're not gonna. Because actually we don't know, because we haven't run against the clock yet to 75 years to see actually people getting their property taken away. But so far what we have seen is, if you own a house and you decide to sell it, the new owner get their 75 years. Right? I mean, so technically, you can sell your children for $1, and they have it for another 75 years. So that's another issue. And they don't pay property tax. So even if they lose their job, they're not going to lose their home. They're not going to get. That's important.
Well, I think something that I'm learning more and more and more, Carl, is that you have to choose your battles. So if you want to be a political cartoonist like I am, and you want to make a career out of criticizing the government, then living in China might not be the best option.
Yes.
Okay. If I'm an activist and I want to do a street protest every month, China might not be where I want to be for that. For example, during COVID, living in South Africa was pretty great, because our government is highly inept and very useless, and they weren't able to effectively lock us down and mandate things. Now, I know in China they were a lot more efficient at that, and in Canada and in other countries.
Jerm, are you telling me South Africa is a libertarian paradise? Is that what you're telling me?
maybe even more an anarchist paradise, because there is a look. Like I said, it depends on what you want. If you want a sense of freedom, then you kind of require a more chaotic society, like many African countries, right? But it comes at a cost. You have very broken infrastructure. Trains are unsafe. Public transport actually is unsafe. My wife can't really walk around on her own at night. So it depends on what it is that you're wanting ultimately.
That's true. There's always a trade-off, right? I mean, pros and cons. And I think the fact that speaks for itself. There's like hundreds of millions of Chinese who have traveled abroad, but most of them return. Many of them travel abroad for traveling, for studying, but many of them do return to China. So that means they apparently find it acceptable or better to stay in China. Another thing is people say, okay, but China is still very poor, in terms of nominal dollar terms compared to U.S. It's still compared to the low income to the income level to United States. Well, that is true in nominal dollar terms, but the money goes a long way. But so is South Africa.
But
money goes a long way in China. There is a power purchase parity. You can get. This is why people develop the Big Mac index, right? Could see how much Big Mac costs in each country and how much they make. But in China, the fact is, people are, on average, Chinese households, they save like 34% of their income. So Chinese household saving is like it's insane. It's something like $22 trillion. It's huge compared to like household savings, say United States, because these people somehow are able to save quite a lot. This is why China is a creditor nation. It's loaning money everywhere, as opposed to a debtor nation like United States, which is $37 trillion in debt. So you can say, yeah, China is poor, but somehow these people are able to save, and they're able to own homes, and they're able to afford to travel abroad, send their children to study abroad. I think they do okay.
You didn't quite finish your thought earlier about the social credit system, though, in China.
It's not a thing. There's not much to talk about because it's not a thing. Because the assumption is, right, if the camera caught you, maybe spitting on the street or something, and then you're gonna be blacklisted from bank loans or something. No, it doesn't work that way. There's no national data system in China for that kind of to build a social credit system, you're going to need a national database, right? To monitor everyone and to log that in. There's no national database in China for that kind of thing. But there are areas, times, like for example, there was a recent viral event of a woman who took somebody's seat on the train. Like she doesn't have, because in China on the train there's different classes. You can buy either seating tickets, you can buy sleeping tickets where you get beds, or you can buy standing only tickets. So this woman apparently she has standing only tickets, but she decided to sit in someone else's seat, and when that someone who came to claim the seat, she refused to give it up. And even when the conductor tried to intercede, she refused to give up the seat. So in that case, she might get blacklisted by the train company. I mean, but it's not like there will be a national database. She will be like blocked from bank loans or anything else. She will just be blacklisted by the train company. But that's understandable. That happens anywhere.
We were talking about the cameras, and I was reminded of that. I think it was a BBC article from a few months ago, where they were talking about China sending a rocket into space, but the picture was a surveillance camera a surveillance camera on the street. Did you see that?
Yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. They're somehow implying there's a Chinese surveillance camera on the moon or something. I mean, and first of all,
but I mean,
nobody is even on the moon right now. Okay, let me remind people, nobody is on the moon at this point, and even I don't think there was American NASA program Artemis that was gonna go, quote unquote, go back to the moon, but I don't think that's even gonna happen with the way NASA is. But you know what? Actually, in a couple of years, the only space station is gonna be Chinese. When because the International Space Station is due to retire in a couple of years. Well, it's supposed to due to retire. We don't know if they're actually able to retire it. But if that happens, the only space station going to be staying up there is going to be Chinese. And it will be whoever the Chinese decide to invite over. And Americans don't get to go, not because Chinese won't invite them over, but because there's a law in U.S. government. The U.S. Congress passed a law, the Wolf Act or something, that prohibits NASA from cooperating with China on space. So this is why China had to create their own space station in the first place, because they refused China to join the ISS, International Space Station. And so, well, they do have cameras. They do have cameras on space station. They do have cameras.
China is coming up in the world as a very powerful economy, and the American empire doesn't like this.
Well, I think that's Marco Rubio, of all people, acknowledged we're in a multipolar world now. And then you have Joseph Borrell, the garden guy, the garden and the jungle guy, basically declaring, yes, the age of Western dominance is over. And I think we're kind of at the last stage of the dollar hegemony right now. This is why.
But do you think Trump is going to welcome multipolarity, or do you think he's trying to slow it down?
No. I mean, like Trump just labeled BRICS as an anti-American alliance, right? I mean, the only thing that led to that outburst is because the Brazilian president Lula, during the BRICS summit, said, okay, we need to have another alternative trading currency. He didn't even explicitly mention US dollar. He just says we need a new trading currency. Otherwise, we're going to end the 21st century like the way we started the 20th century. That's actually pretty stark warning, because we started 20th century with 2 World Wars, and because of that remark, Trump wanted to slap 50% tariff on Brazil and 10% tariff on all BRICS countries, because he said, oh, that's an anti-American alliance. They want to, what did he say? He said they wanted to de-standardize the US dollar, right? And he's already slapping everybody with tariff. Like, what more can he do? And the more he slapped tariff, more people going to move away from the dollar. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the counter argument is that he's playing 5D chess. Is that by slapping on tariffs, he's ultimately strengthening China and other countries.
Oh, he is. He's definitely, but I don't think that was intended. I don't think that was intended. But like I said, Trump is my president for accelerationism. He's a president for accelerationism for U.S. imperial decline.
Make China great again.
Make China great again. I mean, he's a peacemaker, Germs. I mean, he's actually bring all the countries coming together now. Now he just after he slapped tariff on India. Now the Indian Prime Minister Modi is going to go to China. Putin is going to go to China. So Trump is a great peacemaker of Eurasia. He give that guy a Nobel Peace Prize already. He deserves it.
The American-Israeli connection is very fascinating. That is certainly the opposite of peacemaking. And China seems to have a very neutral position, or does it?
Well, yeah. I mean, so China used to have closer ties with Israel because Israel in the 80s and 90s function as a sort of back door, a back channel for China to access Western defense technology, because there's no wall between U.S. and Israel, right? So whatever is U.S. goodies, Israel is gonna get it, and then because China couldn't get it directly from U.S., so they go through the back channel, which is Israel. This is how a lot of the Western tech, especially American military technology, flow to China, is through Israel, because Israel they will sell to anybody who offer money, but that door has closed in 2000 to 2010s because Americans actually told Israelis, okay, you got to stop that. You got to stop selling military technology to China. And so that's one rare instance where U.S. actually told Israel what to do. So Israel, United States do have an option to reign in Israel if they really want it, right? It's just they chose not to. And in other aspect, Israel and U.S. function as almost like the same animal. And for China's perspective, now China have to balance out its relationship with other neighboring countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Iran. China is friendly with both Saudi and Iran. That's how China was able to broker the Saudi-Iran peace deal. So China's relationship with Israel actually, I think, take a hit after October 7th because, it's just not cool to be seen to stand with Israel anymore, unless you are in Washington, you're in the U.S. Congress, but your political career depending on it. And so, I think what U.S. is doing, including its relationship with Israel, what U.S. is doing is lighting fires around all over the world. So that makes United States seems this land of calm, like those oasis of calm among the world light on fire. So all the money, all the U.S. dollars that's been storing elsewhere, like parking Gulf countries, for example, that have no choice but to flow back to United States in foreign stock market, bonds, or real estate market. This is why Trump traveled to the Gulf country recently, right? And because he wants their money. I mean, it's obvious. He wants them to invest in the United States. And the way to do that is to start a war in their region to convince them, okay, your money is not safe. Better put it in the U.S. bonds, U.S. stock market. You'll get better returns and you'll be safe. I think that's what's going on.
I was just in the UAE 2 weeks ago, and the amount of Chinese cars that I saw there is phenomenal, and it's not this cheap junk that might have been the case 20 years ago. We're talking high-end vehicles, and those are now arriving in South Africa. Carl, I can tell you, I've already been test driving a few Chinese cars. I think my next car is going to be Chinese. I've got no more time for European cars that are now just focusing on electric all the time. We've got rolling blackouts. How are we going to charge our cars? so at least the Chinese vehicles are still bringing out diesel, and hybrids, which are also great.
Yeah.
And great quality. That's the point.
Yeah, I mean a lot of the Americans don't even realize that because Biden put 100% on Chinese EVs and so there's no Chinese car that's sold in the United States right now. Like I bought a Chinese car in Indonesia just recently. I highly recommend it. They're when Elon Musk used to laugh at BYD like more than 10 years ago, and back then he was totally that was totally legit. Like he had the right to laugh at BYD more than 10 years ago because BYD was making shitty cars back then. I remember there was a dating show in China and like the all the women, man, they were brutal. They were making fun of the guys that drive in BYD. It's like, no, I'm never gonna date a guy driving a BYD. I was so embarrassing, right? So Elon Musk was correct to laugh at BYD 10 years ago, but things have changed so drastically in 10 years. Now BYD is probably gonna be the world's biggest automaker in 10 years time. I think so. Yeah.
I'll tell you what
so.
I mean, here in South Africa, BYD have got exceptionally good cars. I'm just not interested in electric vehicles, but I really do like GWM and Haval.
Yeah,
those cars are outstanding.
They sell a lot in Russia. They sell a lot in Russia because they're more rugged. Yeah, and I'm
a big fan of GWM.
Yeah, and because the Western companies, they voluntarily gave up all that market. They pulled out of Russia. So it's all Chinese car. All the new car in Russia is in Chinese now.
That's the other thing about Russia. I was when I was over in the UAE, I was hanging out with the Russian guy, and he was saying when America sanctioned Russia, he says it didn't affect us because we just took over all those businesses with Russians, and now we have better quality.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. I mean, I went to Moscow. Their stores are full. Their shops are full, and you would not know that's a country at war. And people. This is why Tucker Carlson went to Moscow a couple months after I went to Moscow, and he was amazed. It's because Americans don't travel, man. They don't know any better, and they really think people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham. They say, oh, Russia is just a giant gas station with nukes. I'm like, if that's a giant gas station, that must be the most beautiful gas station I ever visited because Moscow in summer is beautiful, man. Yeah.
Again, it comes down to propaganda. And it sounds like we have anti-American sentiment, and we don't. That's not the case. I don't dislike Americans. When we talk about America, we generally refer to the deep state or the U.S. government, the whole framework, the structure.
I can attest to that. Jerms is not just trying to cover his ass. He's a great lover of American pop culture and American music in particular.
Yes.
Because you are like a connoisseur of American pop culture, and so
and British.
Yes.
And I mean, my ancestry comes from the UK and Europe. I'm not anti any of that stuff. Americans seem to think that the whole world cares about them and loves them.
And by the way, in the Gulf, they're quite advanced. Dubai
is insane.
Dubai. I mean, I love because I remember I did a transit through Dubai to go to Russia. And, because my internet in Indonesia is shit. And I was trying to upload this file for many times. I keep on failing. And I go to Dubai airport, use their Wi-Fi Zoom. They have real 5G. It's so fast. So I was very impressed. I fell in love. And, to speaking propaganda, even I wasn't immune. Before I went to Russia, even though I am aware of the propaganda being waged against Russia, I thought I'm, pretty cognizant of propaganda. But when I went to Moscow, still it surprised me to see how vibrant the place was in the summertime. And then I realized this is because all the image I see of Moscow is always gloomy images, like in the winter. It's dark. There's never like a sunny day in Moscow in the mainstream media, right? And so when I actually go there and when the birds are chirping, it's sunny, people are walking around in beautiful summer dresses. It's just I was not expecting that. I always surprised. So propaganda affects everyone, and I think it does take effort to kind of deprogram yourself, right? But that's why people listen. That's why people listen to our show, right? That's why people listen to you, Jerms. Yeah.
Well, what's the moral of the story, Carl?
I don't know. I think the moral of the story, just keep an open mind. Travel. Go see for yourself. Like, don't believe. Take everything with a pinch of salt. And have a little skepticism, and then I think you do that very well. And keep an open mind. Always be skeptic, and verify yourself. Trust, but always verify.
But also remember, Chinese propaganda is also real. You don't want to elevate China to this country that now does no harm. The Chinese government also has a deep state.
Germs. Chinese propaganda is shit, man. The Chinese state media. I mean, like, I don't know anybody who could be falling for Chinese propaganda or should be scared of Chinese propaganda. I mean, they're like, if you look at the official Chinese state media, like People's Daily, right? What they tweet out on X, it's either pandas or like high-speed trains or execution
with
of
horrible music
or with horrible music and execution of corrupt officials. That's it. That's like, I can tell. It's almost like they rotate these three stories, right? Pandas, trains, and the execution of corrupt officials.
How can I follow you?
I'm a prolific shit poster on X, just my name, Carl Zha. Again, it's a lot of shit posts, so don't take me seriously. Unless it's true, then do take it seriously. And I do have a YouTube channel, Carl Zha, again, same, just my name, Carl Zha. And I have a Patreon site where I post more stuff on Chinese history. I'm doing a chronological retelling of Chinese history from like the very beginning. Now I'm up to like 316 BC. So equivalent in the Western history is like the period after Alexander the Great just died. So, I still have like 2,500, 400 years, 300 years to go. Taking my time.
It's not that much work.
Nah, I'm going to live a long time, Germs. I'm going to live a long time. Yeah.
All right, Carl Zha, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.